Hey everybody, welcome to Wednesday. Gonna do something a little bit different today. We'll see how it goes. I know people are getting their kids back in school in the US. Yikes, you guys go back early. But we'll see how it goes. Maybe this kind of content, I suspect it won't draw huge numbers because of search, but some people might find it interesting enough to become patrons. So help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Obviously, patrons' priorities are first when it comes to choosing content. This topic, the whole idea of sort of the unique issues involving masculinity and gamers, or specific, perhaps unique may not be totally accurate, but specific. When we talk about who plays games and what they want, we are obviously not talking about all guys everywhere. We're talking about a specific subset of guys. Now, a majority of men play games. However, gamers, people who identify as gamers, are a different subset, right? And I realize that part of the problem and part of the reason things get so crazy about certain topics is because there's been a lot of stuff about women in video games. And there's been a lot of stuff about trans people or LGBTQ plus people in video games. But there hasn't been a ton of actual examination of the guys who play video games or what video games reflect about masculinity, say about masculinity. And that could explain a lot of the freakouts that happen. Because, one of the things I've seen is, with the Matrix thing, people that otherwise, seem like cool dudes, get along with totally fine on Twitter, I've been talking to them for a few years now, on and off, and all of a sudden, not all of them, obviously, but a notable minority of them just lost their minds over that Matrix thing. And as much as I'm not going to change my mind just because somebody freaks out, obviously, I am sensitive to when I see enough people losing it. I don't have to agree with their perspective. I don't even have to think their perspective is particularly healthy to go, what's behind it? And I think back to some of the very interesting conversations I had during Gamergate. Yes, there were civil conversations that happened during Gamergate. They happened in private, not on public Twitter. But the discussions I heard, the point I heard over and over and over again is that cisgendered male gamers, gay and straight alike, didn't understand the whole representation of women thing. The whole put in regular normal women, because in a lot of the games they liked, they weren't exactly filled with regular normal men. And I hate the term normal, but that was the term that came up. Like average women, normal women, not exceptional women. And okay, fair point. For every game like Alan Wake or Heavy Rain, both games I enjoyed, you have games, especially like in the 2000s, of space marines that, of course, no human being possibly compares to that. Certainly not, computer programmers and introverted dudes who play games. And I think that's a fair point. Granted, I mean, one of the most famous and influential video game characters ever is an overweight plumber with facial hair. That matters. But it is also true that in the shooter era, that a lot of people, I notice it's sort of that comic speculator market, Xbox era Xbox 360 more accurately, shooter era people, the people that came into this media at that time, are the ones that are feeling like they're left behind. And as much as it's tempting to just go, well, that's because they're sexist and they gain in, they fall prey to toxic masculinity and all that stuff. I don't think that's it. As somebody who, good Lord, I've been doing this a long time, but as somebody who was not a personality, but someone who was covering events, who went to all the Halo launches, who went to all the Gears launches, who, saw the thing be a phenomenon, and to compare that to games like, Alan Wake that launched very differently. The Alan Wake preview I went to was cool because the power actually went out during it, which was so freaking perfect, but obviously completely accidental. But it was in a library instead of some sort of warehouse with pounding music. And the Alan Wake event was press only, not open to the public. There were no t-shirts with their gamer tag on it. And I remember was it the Gears 3 launch? It was either Gears 2 or Gears 3 that you got a bag of meat. It was fake meat, but it was like a chunk of bloody meat. That was one of the swags. But you could also get a Gears t-shirt, and they would screen print your gamer tag on it. And I said, can I get the shirt without the customization? And everybody's like, well, what? Sure, but why would you want that? I said, because I don't want to walk around here with my gamer tag out for any rando to see. And you saw the PR people kind of go, right, different priorities here. And that sense of belonging, that sense of being a part of something, that, your gamer tag being public and you want random people to just add you, and that whole phenomenon of finally being one of the cool kids, I think was a very big part of, not only the Xbox era, but also that speculator market era in comics, where that was when, San Diego Comic-Con started getting massive, huge. God, I remember the days where you could still move around at Comic-Con. I preferred those days, but I get everything has their season. It must come to an end. But I saw this stuff change, and I saw gamers, and I covered it too, which is a different framework. But I saw gaming and covered gaming going from this kind of nerdy thing that nerds did. Nerd. I mean, when I was in the gifted program, everybody played video games. I mean, thinking about it now, the idea in grade 5 that it was me and 3 guys huddled around a Crystal Castles play session in a guy's basement, this idea that you would ever let a girl in that now is it was a gentler time. We were afraid of far less back then, and nothing happened except we played a lot of Crystal Castles, stuff like that. But I mean, coming to school when people were beating Metroid, and it was oh, I got a secret. It was very different. And then Mario and the platformer era, and then even the PlayStation era, it was really different. And then I think it started to change with Doom and Mortal Kombat, because Mortal Kombat had that pop culture phenomenon thing. But you didn't hear celebrities talking about playing video games then. That was the influence of Xbox, right? Not in the West. Japan's different. Japan has completely different culture surrounding video games and manga. But finally, these guys, and yeah, it was a phenomenon that mostly affected guys, because hey, chicks like me were still fucking weird to the to the most part. We were seen as less feminine for liking video games as opposed to being a cool person. Though, guys who like games think we're cool, but different thing. Those guys who were previously, I hate to say something triggering, but we're being frank, losers, all of a sudden, at least marginally, we're at the cool kids table now. And that lasted maybe 10 years. So, gaming starts to get going in, if we take when it really started, like Space Invaders, Killer App, that kind of thing, not counting Pong, we're talking the late 70s. And then in the 80s, it was kind of a nerd thing. And in the 90s, it was very much a nerd thing. And again, I've been alive for all of this. I saw it. I experienced it, right? And then all of a sudden, in the aughts and in the 2000s, it becomes a not nerd thing. And all these guys are like, finally, right? And the, Space Marines that are in the games, these aren't guys that the guys playing the games see as reflections of themselves. I think that's why they keep saying, it's about the gameplay. I think there's a sort of unconscious or subconscious kind of vicarious, I can be this in a game, I can't be this in real life. Because what I hear over and over and over from guys is, we don't look like that, it's not real. And so it's this weird tension, right, of now you're part of something cool, but all the messages you're getting about what makes it cool are depictions of masculinity that aren't you. And somehow, you don't feel like the depictions of cool masculinity they're in video games are representative of the body you inhabit, if that makes any sense. But they were still part of something. They were still a demographic that mattered. Their tastes, their preferences were something that people were finally listening to instead of hearing "shut up, nerd." And that lasted about 10 years, and now it's going away again. Now they're back to, instead of it "shut up, nerd," it's "shut up, misogynist," or "shut up, cis scum," or "shut up, white man," or something like that. And when we talk about that model is less aggrieved entitlement, which is somebody who has always been sort of in that upper echelon, now losing it and doing anything they can possibly think of, no matter how otherwise immoral, to get it back. That is what we call kind of, when we talk about peripherals of privilege, whiteness theory deals with this a lot, that there's certain groups of people, biracial people, Jewish people, who are white in some ways and not white in others. And so we sort of exist on the boundary. I mean, okay, to look at me, I'm white as a ghost. And that's where you're like, but it's a religion. This stuff makes no sense. It's all about how do we sort people in somewhat arbitrary ways, right? So it's more like that. It's more like the immigrant waves of when, the Germans and the Irish and the Italians and the Jews and everyone like that came over in early America and established businesses, and they were the absolute worst to subsequent immigrant waves because they were replicating what people did to them when they first got there before they sort of became an accepted part of the cultural framework. And so they feel threatened about their status because it's always on shaky ground. That's what I'm seeing more with guys in gaming. That fits more than the kind of accepted theory that these guys are just misogynists and hate women, or they're homophobes who hate gay people, or they're transphobes or whatever. The majority of people I see losing it about things do not fit that description. I have seen them interact with people who fit all those things, and they're fine one-to-one. It's just something makes them feel threatened, and then all of a sudden they attack. And that's what happens when you start poking at someone's identity. That's why the whole trans thing is unique now, because unlike other forms of bigotry, you know, um, a woman is a bad thing, but nobody says you're not a woman. The color of your skin is a bad thing, but nobody says you're not that color. That's why by erasure or um, uh, the issues involving biracial people are so fraught, because there is an element of erasure there. The whole model minority thing, all that kind of, because it's different when someone says you're this so you're bad, and when someone says, but you're not really this, right? Like, you're not really a racialized person, which is what a lot of Asian people I know get. Um, but with trans people, it's, well, you're not your gender identity. And that's sort of kind of the same with what's going on with these gamers, who people are telling them they're something they're not. People are attacking them on the basis of identity in a way that is not, you're this so you're bad. It's, you're not this. And in that, it's, you belong here, or you are an insider here, or you're one of the cool kids. And now people are saying, no, you're not, it's not for you. And that's different than, even though the tangible detail they say is, I'm bad because I'm a white man. That's a different reaction, right? Because somebody who's solid in their identity is, well, that's not true. Nobody's inherently awful because of immutable characteristics. And, if somebody does that, you can easily dismiss them. But when someone's yanking an identity status away from you, that's when people go crazy, because that messes you up. I mean, I had people tell me all the time I couldn't possibly be a gamer, which is why I hate the term girl gamer. That didn't bother me super much. But there were times when I was younger, when I was so smart, that people forgot I was female. I had all these male friends. It was like, intellectual peers. And so they stopped thinking of me as a woman. And I'd get things like, Leanna, if you were a girl, would you, that cut, that. And the thing is, I get the whole dead naming thing with trans people, because I know totally the people who said that were not intending to be hurtful. And yet, to this day, those are probably some of the most hurtful comments I have ever experienced in my life. And because it's not intentional, because it's just somebody erasing a big part of your identity. And I think the reason things are so shitty right now is because you've got one group of people who are having their identities erased, and you've got another group of people, and by that I mean like trans people, non-binary people, bisexual people, biracial people, and then even people who are still kind of stigmatized, but in terms of yeah, you're bad because you're this. You've got that people, but then you've got the other people who are having the exact same things happen in opposition. And by that, it's that sort of white, straight, cisgendered nerd guy who was bottom of the pecking order in white spaces, in white, straight, cisgender spaces. They were pond scum. They were bottom of the barrel. They were the ones that got picked on when there were no Black, Asian, or Latino people to pick on. Right? Latin people, whatever. But I'm talking male spaces. So the perception of these guys and the experience of these guys don't match. And that's why everything is going nuts. In order to sort of do inclusion, it actually has to be inclusive and recognize that general rhetoric that you use with business leaders and politicians and people who actually do have some sort of power and were maybe captain of the football team when they were a kid. It doesn't work here because you're not actually speaking to the crowd that you're in front of. And so your message is bombing. And I think that's why, a lot of my content reaches people a lot better. Not that I'm trying to convert anybody. That's the whole point. I'm not. I'm just saying this is my opinion. This is why I think it holds up. This is why I think certain other opinions are wrong. But I have no vested interest in changing someone's mind. I'm here primarily to just give people something to watch 4 days a week, 5 if you're a patron, right? That's my primary goal. Make it interesting, make it entertaining, make people think. I'm not necessarily trying to persuade, which has always got me in trouble with God in college and my early career with writing, with op-ed writing. Um, how are you persuading? This isn't the language of persuasion. And I'm like, I know, because it says opinion editorial, not persuasion editorial. I'm going to express my opinion. Trust me, it's bad enough being a woman with an opinion. You want me to take on this really aggressive, volatile language that all you guys can get away with, but the minute it's a woman, it's seen as a very different thing. Oh, fuck yeah, you think that's why women get harassed online? Yeah, that's a big part of it. They're not recognizing that if women talk like men, there's a backlash. The same way if men talk like women, there's a backlash. People don't even realize what they're reacting to. They just do it. And the fact that all our intellectual spaces are masculinized, like, of course people are going to have bad reactions. We're not normalizing as okay the way women are more natural, typical women. I have a very masculine communication style. And even then, I don't want to go as hard all the time. I'll label things as rants when I'm really going. But I don't want to go as hard as the industry, when I was a games journalist, forced me to. And so guess what? When you're pushed into it, and then people dogpile you because they think you're an asshole, and you get no support from the very editors that forced you into that position, you know what? It fucking sucks. And those are the sort of experiences where, I know some guys who aren't women but know what it's like to be forced into something unnatural, and they get shit on and nobody has their back. These are the sorts of common understandings that we can use to build on. But this requires people to actually be able to specify with a certain amount of accuracy what was wrong with it, why it sucked, why it felt unnatural. Because it's not about the female experience or the male experience or the gay experience or, the racialized experience. It's about people can connect to emotions connected to the experience. We can connect over the idea of feeling forced into something that was unnatural, having to eat shit, and all the people that pushed you into it were just nowhere to be found when it came to pay the piper. We can all connect with that, right? We can all connect with that sense of feeling bullied, the sense of being, coerced. And we can build things in common surrounding that. But we can't do that with coercive language. We can't do that with language that just replicates that pain. And that's, it's one thing to say people who have firsthand knowledge or experience in something, are experts in that. That's the whole meritocracy that people talk about. So, of course, a woman is going to be more of an expert in the experience of being a woman than a man is. But that also doesn't mean that one woman speaks for all women, right? It's just more experience in that regard than a guy. The same way for many, many years, I didn't talk about this kind of stuff because I'm not a guy, and I can only connect the way I'm doing through listening to people and telling you what I've been told. I can't speak firsthand to that experience. And I'm not going to tell a guy what his experience or what his relationship with masculinity should be, because I have no idea what it's like other than, playing a few male performative characters as a swing performer, what that's about. Like when you do theater school, you actually have to learn how to play women, the shorthand for women on stage and the shorthand for men on stage, but that's it. I've never lived as a guy. I've never had to. So you know, we got to be sensitive to these things, and we have to be smart about these things, and we have to be rational about these things, because that's the way we build. People may not be able to tell you why they're reacting badly because they're too busy reacting badly, right? So if you like this sort of thing, if you think this is the right way forward, well, leave a comment for one. But if you want to support this sort of thing, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, because games are the way to tell these experiences in an interactive way. Thanks for watching.